Oops. Okay, recording. Welcome everyone to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. I'm Phil Grooms, and I have a special guest today, Justin Horniker. Justin, you bailed me out bad. Matt and I have been traveling like crazy. Last night I realized I was alone way too late, and I was like, Justin, can you meet me in the morning? And you're here. Thank God. I appreciate it,
Absolutely.
man. How you doing?
Happy to be here, Phil. Hello, everyone.
You're my favorite because you can. I shouldn't say that, but you are. You come on. You know everything that there is to need to be known. You're great on the show, so thanks, man. Great. So introduction. If you guys don't know Justin, he has the Talkin' Soccer Substack. He has those stories that are on STL Magazine, and we're going to talk about both of his most recent pieces as we go through this outline. I'm excited to throw those in there, but mostly we're going to be getting you ready for St. Louis versus Nashville. They're playing at home, 7:30 p.m. So at Energizer Park. Looking forward to that. A nice homecoming for some St. Louisans that play for Nashville. We'll dig into the details, but first, I don't think we should bury the lead here. Something massive happened this week, and that is that Joachim Nilsson's contract was bought out. So officially the wordage would be that St. Louis SC has exercised the buyout of his guaranteed contract. Nilsson is a 31-year-old Swedish center back, if you guys didn't know, and understandably so, because he's been very, very injured over the years, even though his quality was quite high. I almost said Matt. Justin, how did you take this in? I'd like to hear your thoughts, and then we'll kind of close out with some more facts if we need them.
Yeah, it's that thing where it's like you understand from both sides. I think from like the team side, obviously, with Nilsson probably not being back this year anyway, and like for his own health, like this is probably a good decision. Like I think that was the wording I was told, said they thought this was best for not just the team but for Joachim as well, just because he's been fighting to get healthy all year. And yeah, it sucks for a guy of that quality that just like his body isn't cooperating for him, and like it just, not to say it's heartbreaking, but you hate to see like an athlete not be able to go out on their own terms, I think. So hopefully Nilsson will be able to get back onto the pitch at some point. But yeah, I think it's kind of best for everyone that, now he can kind of reset and approach it from there. But yeah, a guy that was really loved within the club, within the organization, and seemed to love St. Louis a lot. So you hate to see it go like that.
Yeah, absolute class goodbye letter from him that was published in the Post-Dispatch and on X. I encourage you guys to go find that because, of course, there's some ugly comments out there, but I think most St. Louis fans are being as classy as Joachim, and I think that was just a beautiful way for him to say goodbye. And you have to wonder what's going through his mind on top of the things you mentioned, Justin. It could have been, anger or bitterness towards St. Louis, but he touted the fans. He said thank you, and moving on to the next phase of life. I think you put that really, really well. I think one really good thing to remember is that bicycle kick versus LA Galaxy.
Oh, yeah.
It's everyone's been posting it, but a lot of good memories. I think the things I loved about Nilsson, he wasn't the fastest center back, but he just took such great angles, and I think he was one of our best at 1v1, just like being left out on an island on a counterattack, and he would most often, he would always slow the guy down and stop him, and if he didn't get reinforcements, sometimes there would be a goal here and there, but most of the time he was able to take care of business. He was so trustworthy, good with his feet, good in the air. I mean, just all around, basically, if Fayu Fall ends up being that good, I will be so happy, right?
Yeah, just generally calm. Like I think that's a good presence too. Just like this like calming presence in the back line, I think everyone needs.
Yes. I'm taking my time on this. Obviously, Matt Baker's not here, and so our stats are going to be a little bit shorter than usual. But talking about his absence also means that some things are gone as well, right? The cash has exited the fund for Carolyn Kindle. It was $1,255,000, $750. You guys hear me? 1.2 basically $1 million that will be gone from the bank account, but it's also off of the 2025 roster cap. So That's nice. I believe, Justin, I meant to ask you this off air. Matt's not here. I had him on my depth chart as occupying an international slot as well. Do you know for sure whether that's true?
So he earned his green card, and I believe that after
Okay.
this window, he wouldn't have been on the. My understanding of the whole green card idea is that like when you get your green card, when you go to register the roster next, you're not taking up an international slot. So that was my understanding. But yeah,
Mhm.
obviously, like the roster spot itself is important right now, and 1.2 off the salary cap is also for someone who might not have been playing much is good to have.
Absolutely. And on the senior roster as well. So even if the international slot is null and void in this case, it sounds like there's still an international slot available, a senior roster slot, $1.2 million worth of salary that maybe could be spent. If you and I had our choice, right, we would spend that money.
If I had my
But
druthers.
we are who we are. So great. Anything else you want to say about, do you want to mention like there's a roster slot there, maybe what you would do in this situation or?
Yeah, like I see it as like I think just because they've bought in a couple like young center backs, like I don't think that's a roster spot that necessarily goes to another center back, but
Yeah.
like they could certainly if they wanted to go like look for another midfielder, I don't think that'd be the worst idea. And how they would use that roster spot. But
Mm.
yeah, I also wonder if it's like opens up space for some of those young players to come up just to have those spots available. But time will tell, I guess, on that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. I've been seeing a lot of shots for perhaps another 9 just for depth, perhaps
Hmm.
a 6 if we are worried about Durkin being available long term. That player that Blom was supposed to be is just like a profile every team needs. And so those are good
Yeah,
shouts. I
and
don't
I
know
was
if
to say, yeah, and it's
Padelford
a player that
is.
and it's a player they haven't been able to kind of replace Edward Blom also because like JGR can kind of do that, but I think they see him more as a center back than a defensive mid, even though he's looked pretty decent in those like his appearances recently. So yeah, I think they have a lot of players that can play that position, but no one that like outside of Dirk and that it is their position.
Yeah, like an absolute shutdown guy that
Yeah.
can cover some ground. Excuse me. Left back too. It just feels like perhaps left back isn't settled. So
Mhm.
I wouldn't mind getting
It
just
does feel like
like
that,
an
doesn't it?
yeah, since the inception, right? So, yeah, I guess that goes without saying. I love that you put it that way. All right, so I think that wraps up Nilsson's conversation there. We could go so much deeper, but I know we're going to beat this one to death over the next several weeks and perhaps through the off season as well. So that'll be a fun one to keep talking about. Some other news and stories throughout the week. Is that Klaus and Hartl were out sick on Tuesday, and they kind of kept them out in order to not spread the sickness, but they were back on Thursday from what I saw. Awesome. The other big news, this is kind of my favorite news of the week, is Kessler returns to training. And I think that's going to be a theme throughout the show today. Literally the only person missing from the roster, possibly, depending on Toy Shirt, which I'm about to get to, is Wenzel is out. Sounds like he's not coming back soon. So that's amazing. One person off the roster, it feels like possibly this weekend. How does that feel, Justin?
Yeah, like to asking David Critchley about it yesterday, it you could tell that he was excited to have like most of his roster there to be able to select from. Obviously, it's a little late in the season than you'd want to be at this point, but like I think just to have the complete roster there is a breath of fresh air for where this club was like a month ago,
Mhm.
2 months ago even. But yeah, it was nice to see, and Klaus and Hartl both were in majority of training on Thursday as well. So like yeah, it's looking like they sounded like they're expecting Twisher to be all right. Like it sounded like this was just strictly a we don't want this to turn into anything else kind of decision. But yeah, they'll take it day by day.
Yes, and let's get that out of the way. Toy Shirt out day to day for muscle fatigue. So it sounds like it's precautionary. It sounds like he'll be
Yeah.
available Saturday if they want to push him. So is what it is. And it used to be we would talk about, do we want to push them? They could get hurt because it felt like every time someone was brought in earlier or they were a little bit of worry, they'd end up being out long term. And I just have to ask you this. I got to answer some questions for Ben Wright at 615 Soccer, and I mentioned the correlation is about as hard as I wanted to go on this topic. The correlation between Olaf and just a mass amount of injuries for St. Louis. But do you feel like the athletic department in St. Louis is is kind of like, hey guys, look, like Olaf was gone about a month and a half ago, whatever it is, and now everyone's healthy. Is that correlation there, Justin? Do you think that maybe we can
It
start
is. It is
assuming things?
certainly. I had that thought yesterday, like talking to Critch about it, because I did have that thought. Like, I don't know. Like, I think it's more that like the transition from preseason to regular season. Maybe that has to do with like a new system, different intensity. But it's not like these
Hmm.
guys aren't training like at a high intensity like they have for the past 3 years. Um, Yeah, it's certainly interesting though, because yeah, you can see everyone getting healthy. There haven't really been new training injuries over the past month or so, which is important for this team. And like recovery seems to be going better. So like
Hmm.
you can at least track the trend line going up. And I like if anything, they've at least tried to learn to deal with like whatever was happening in training. And maybe it was just a bunch of freak accidents that kept occurring. But yeah, there's a worry for a bit.
Yeah, it's worth
Probably still
mentioning
is.
and worth taking note. I think next year we'll be kind of watching to see if it stays this good, right? Or
Because
whether
that's
this
always
was.
like the problem is coming from like preseason to like when you're loading up your like hard training. Because like sometimes, especially if you're coming from like a long MLS offseason, you
Hmm.
might not be like muscle wise, you might not be ready to take on that load that maybe they were trying to put on them in preseason. I don't know, but
Hmm.
always something to track.
Absolutely. Well, you're listening to Flyover Footy on the big 550 KTRS. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're here with us on the radio, I have Justin Horniker joining me, and we're going to do a bit of a bird's eye view. I'm going to give a whole bunch of thoughts and stats here for a second, Justin, and then we'll kind of talk about as many of them as we can as we go here. So head to head, this is only the second game against Nashville, which I was surprised about. I wonder if I'm thinking about preseason. I'm sure neither of us never looked that up because it's not that important, but the last time we faced Nashville, it was a 3-1 loss on June 17th in 2023. Joe Aquini was the player that scored the lone goal for St. Louis, and that was like a game where Klaus must have been out because that was the phase where Joe Aquini was filling in as a full-on striker up top alone. And so that was interesting. But, the bad news here is Hani Mukhtar got a hat trick, which, yeah,
Yeah, he's
it
got to do
is
that.
what it is. That's him doing his thing, right? Thoughts of like it feels like the Bouanga situation when I looked that up. I was like, oh man, that reminds me of that. And rightfully so, they can be a similar player in some ways. Nashville SC, their standings in recent form, they're third in the East, 14-6-5 record. They have 47 points in 25 matches. They have 42 goals forced. They've allowed 26 goals. They have a 16 goal differential. They're 5-5-2 away. They only have one loss at home, but their last two away games were losses. So, it almost has that feeling. The positive here might be if we're going to beat Nashville, it kind of needs to come at home, right?
Mm. Yeah,
Uh,
Nashville had been very good under BJ Callahan. Like,
yeah.
it's hard not to like how he's turned that team around from a team that like could not put the ball in the back of the net with Hani Mukhtar like leading the attack last year and now turning into this year, like unlocking Sam Surridge. And just especially after like the first couple of games, they've been a very, very good team. So it is a testament to what like a good manager can do for a team, but also they
Mm.
think they have a good like idea of how they want to play, and it's worked out. I think they might end up surprising a lot of people in the East this year, like towards the end of
Yeah.
the season.
I love the BJ Callahan story arc. And even I said to Ben, I'm jealous of what, Nashville was able to grow this year and
Mhm.
have fire in these games as well. Like kind of combine the old them with the new them has been really fun to watch. As a flyover footy, right? I kind of root for some of the Midwestern teams in some ways, especially if they play like we do or like Nashville does. It's something I like to see. They
Yeah,
also
and I
played
like
Aston.
seeing
Oh, go
like,
ahead.
and I like this with like Mikey Veras too. These guys that have been in like the U.S. national team setup and were
So
like,
true.
given like a sliver of a chance and use that to like bounce their way into a manager job, and like to see BJ kind of running away with it is very nice.
Especially BJ. I love the the like lineman coach kind of comments that come about him. He's so
Yeah.
unsuspectingly really good at his job. So love to see that as well. San Diego, man, another team that's starting to do it so well. So that's been fun to watch. Aston Villa also played them in a friendly on August 2nd. That was their last game. They drew them 2-2. So good for them. kind of cool that we both got to play them. Trends, they have 7 goals in their last 5 matches. St. Louis has 5 and 5, I think, is what I saw there. They have the most penalty kicks this season with 10, which is interesting. And we'll cover this a little later, but Hani Mukhtar, we just mentioned how dangerous he is. He has the most shots on target per match with 2.1. My goodness. Well done. He also has the most shots. Yeah, amazing. Injuries, nothing big. Tyler Boyd, winger that they didn't start anyway. Maximus Ek looks like a younger player. Tyler Washington is their left back, but he's mostly been on the bench when he hasn't been injured. So they're pretty much full strength, it sounds like, for their best players. Big storyline key players. Jack Mayer and Joe Willis are coming home. They're St. Louisans, if you didn't know. I'm sure everyone who listens to this show knows that. But I recommend, I'm going to try to post this as well with the show later. Nashville had a pre-match presser, and Joe Willis was asked and got to talk a whole lot about playing in St. Louis and, you know, the history of soccer in St. Louis. So I recommend everybody looks at that again. I'll try to post that. It was really cool. I won't go
I love hearing that from a guy like Joe, because like with Jack, it's like, you know, knows the modern St. Louis soccer landscape, but for like someone like Joe Willis that's been in the league as long as he has and kind of like gone through the ringer a bit, to hear him talk about just kind of the soccer scene is very fun.
It was, absolutely. I won't ruin it for you, but, you know, he mentions his best and his worst soccer memory from childhood. And one was a really good St. Louis Scott Gallagher memory, and the other one was a very bad Chaminade memory. So, you know, Scott Gallagher, Chaminade, just that's as St. Louis as it gets when it comes to soccer. So, again, check that out. Key players, and then I'm going to throw to you for maybe some zoomed out thoughts on Nashville, Justin. Hani Mukhtar is one of their key players. He has 11 goals. We just know what he's like, right? Like, he has the ability. They don't play like this anymore. They used to, but they have the ability, just like Denny Bouanga, to just launch the ball to Mukhtar and he can do the rest, right? So watch for him to be absolutely dangerous on that right wing, folding in most of the time, getting in behind. Sam Surridge was added around the time that BJ Callahan came, and he made just a big difference. They became a more rounded team when he came. He's tied with Messi for the Golden Boot, guys, at 18 goals. So massive player there for them in that system. And then this was a surprise to me. Andy Nahar is a Honduran right back. I found him because he has the most assists on the team. He's up there for the most in the league. I can't remember if he is. 10 assists at right back. He has monster passing stats for a right back. His take on stats are also very high. So it sounds like he's very able to dribble a player. And it feels like they're going to be sending in a lot of crosses, though I don't know if that's the full answer. I wasn't able to get that from Ben right before we started, but that was a cool story that I kind of came across. Justin, what are you expecting to see from Nashville? And, you know, just generally, nothing too specific. We're about to get to that, but what do you think we'll see?
Yeah, I think Nashville, like, I think it's a good tale of, like, if you believe in your players, like getting the right manager to then like go forward, is like what they've been able to do. And I've watched like a couple of Nashville games, and they're a lot more like high powered or like, you know, fast paced than they were previously. Cause yeah, if you think of the old Nashville teams, they are kind of like sit back, absorb the pressure, wait to hit you on the counter, like find Mukhtar in transition, but they're a lot more comfortable on the ball and comfortable just like controlling the attack and controlling through possession. They can kind of do a little bit of everything. And I think that's like, if you think of how the U.S. men's national team wants to play, that's essentially like what Nashville are like, you know, trying to pull out here. And you have the strong defensive spine that they've always had, and then you also have Hani Mukhtar and Sam Surridge, like more aggressive in the attack, more activated in the attack. And like, if you look to when Surridge first arrived last year, there was maybe, you know, talk that he wasn't working out, and then they turned into this season, and it just turns out that he just needed better service. So. Yeah. And I like the Andy Nahar shout, because that's another player who like was in MLS, kind of bounced around.
Yeah.
DC United, like that's just where you go to die on the vine, and then comes back to Nashville and is having a great year.
Yeah. Very, very cool. I was so shocked to see, you know, I was like, whoa, this guy's a good player. Where'd he come from? Thinking he was a foreign, you know, he was playing somewhere abroad. No, DC United. What a great
Half
find.
guy. Yeah, it's great.
Very cool. Okay, so St. Louis, zoomed out on St. Louis standings in recent form. We're 14th in the West, 14-6 record on 18 points, 24 matches played. Let's just skip all this for goodness sake. We are 2-6-1 under David Critchley. And it has to be mentioned that I don't know where I put this, but I kind of remember what it was. We're 2 points ahead of LA Galaxy. We're tied with Montreal on points. Yes, they're in the East, but that is unfortunately the wooden spoon. The race to not get the wooden spoon. I didn't check the points, and I don't remember how the tie would be broken if we were tied with CF Montreal for last. Do you know that answer, Justin?
I think Montreal have a worse goal differential. So
yeah, I think its goal for differential is the tiebreaker, right? Or goals scored. I feel like MLS kind of put emphasis one year on goals scored. So I'm
what
not
is
sure.
what is the official wooden spoon tiebreaker? Do we have an official?
I'm so sad we're looking this up. We'll look it up sometime. And I think I feel like Matt will probably end
Yeah,
up
either
listening to
way,
this.
if you're in the conversation, it's not going well. That's the zoomed out
Right.
conversation there.
Yeah, done and dusted. That's that
Mhm.
conversation. Cool. So we mentioned let's do a little bit of discussion here. We mentioned Toy Shirt maybe being out, and Justin, that was your most recent STL Mag story. I'm starting to mix them up, but it's your STL Mag story about Toy Shirt getting that start against getting to play as the 10 against Aston Villa, and wanted to kind of hear you break down a little bit of that if you could.
Yeah, and I think it like a big talking point that Critchley kind of leaned on after that Aston Villa match in the presser is just trying to build up not just Toy Shirt's confidence, but that competition that the club has. Like, if you think of the success under Bradley Carnell the first year and like some of the success last year, it's always been in not just playing well as a unit, but having players that are so hungry to get in the starting lineup and having this competition of like similar style players, similar abilities of everyone wants to get in that starting lineup. And that hunger kind of drives the success of the team. Like, that has kind of been the feeling of like when they've been successful. So getting back to that point, it's important then to have Cedric Toyshirt like confident scoring. If you look at like how he played last year since coming over, he kind of outperformed his expected goals, which I think for a player like that, that's what you want to see. That's when you know that he's like in the pocket, he's feeling the groove. And he has not done that this year and has also not just underperformed on that, but he just hasn't been getting the touches in the box and the touches where he needs. So not just like getting Torture's confidence up, but the way that they're able to play in that second half once him and Simon Betcher were in the game and like having that kind of interplay. And then now you have the competition with Same Bin coming in and, you know, who's going to start on the left, who's going to start on the right. Like, are you going to deploy him there? Are you going to move him centrally? Like, there's a lot of options and questions now of if he's in form, like, how do we get him on the field? How do we best utilize him? But, you know, that has to come with him being healthy and on the pitch, but also, you know, finding those moments of, okay, if Sangbin starts, can Torture then come in the second half and have that impact and earn more opportunities and get back in that starting lineup going forward? And that kind of hunger, I think, is what they're looking for in terms of like, how do we end the season on a high note? It's everyone moving in the same direction, but also everyone hungry to end the season strong and show what kind of player you are.
Yeah, hunger. It's got to be hard when you're in the place that we are right now, and so that's been a storyline for me. But also, you touched on in your story. You know, the two things that have been bugging me about Toy Shirt is him playing kind of out of position on the right wing when he does, not like at Aston Villa when he scored, right? But also his health, right? Maybe he's been struggling to come back fully as well. Because I think my friends and I got like annoyed with some of his lack of sprinting at times. I think we finally gave him trouble for it, but he looked good against Aston Villa. So I wanted to ask you about those two things.
Yeah, I think if you think about like when he was successful last year, it was when like him and Klaus, like he was behind the two strikers. You know, he was essentially that 10, even as a shadow striker and like picking the ball up through the midfield and like carrying it that way. And with Hartel playing more centrally this year, as opposed to like out on the left and bringing it in, you kind of lose that. So now he has to be on the right and come in centrally. And like, yeah, maybe it's finding comfort in starting out wide and tracking in, but like because I don't think he is like an out and out striker, like Klaus or Petrick can play. He has to kind of drop back in, and I think you want him to be on the ball and carrying it through the midfield, as opposed to like he's not going to be that fox in the box, getting on the end of headers necessarily.
Which is what he wants, right? And it's what he's best at. I thought it was interesting you brought up the fact that Hartl's been playing centrally, which is, I feel like, unavoidable. Unfortunately, like he's just so good there. That's where he needs to be.
Yeah, I don't know what the answer is when they both play well, like centrally, right?
Yeah.
And like last year, if you look at how like Hackworth deployed them, it was like Hartle starting off on the left, but coming in, but like, the shell of the formation, he was on the left. But I don't know if that necessarily works in the current iteration of their 4-2-3-1.
Right. And even when he was playing left, he was moving around so much, it kind of was the same position anyway.
Really.
Yeah. But one thing I wondered, I didn't think about this till I read your article, that that Toyshirt was paired with Betcher, not Klaus.
Yeah.
In that one. So I think he's played the 10, but I think last time he played the 10, it wasn't very long. It wasn't a full game, but he was paired with Klaus, who was dropping in, whereas Betcher's running in behind. And I think for me, reading your story, it unlocked something for me that if we have to sub in Betcher, I feel like maybe that's when we need to throw Toyshirt in and let them do their thing, because Betcher in that goal was out wide and high, and Toyshirt was in and around the box, like that's where he wants to be. He's been doing that as a right winger, but like he has other jobs that he has to do that he's just not as good at. Right. And so we get frustrated until he gets in the box, and it's just not him being able to be himself an entire 90 minutes. And so that's not the team's fault. That's not all his fault. It just is what it is. Right. And we just got to figure out how to make it work. It was just interesting. Maybe him and Betcher together in the future could be a thing.
Yeah. I think if you like look at how that second group played against Aston Villa, like I think not only did they have some success with like where their energy levels were at, and obviously that goal comes from Durkin kind of maybe getting away with something, but you have to like the energy. And I think they played in a different way than the first group did. And if you're looking ahead to, okay, how can they utilize this? Like, obviously that's a look that worked. And if you think that personnel, like if you can start with their roster, they've been starting with that 11 and then bring on Betcher and Toyshirt, on the second half or sometime in the second half, just to give a different look. Like we've seen Betcher have success coming off the bench just because he does not need much time to get involved. And maybe Toyshirt can be that same way.
Agree. Also, I just love in that second half, I almost enjoyed the soccer more, even though it wasn't like, I just love the energy, I guess, is what I should say. I shouldn't say I liked the soccer more because it wasn't as fancy, but we had so many like try-hard guys on the field. It looked amazing. Like McSorley looked like a special player at times,
Yeah, I wonder what's next for him. Yeah, because he does have that, and like he's always has the energy, and I think like clearly they like him, but like he's kind of on that cusp of maybe like high end of MLS Next Pro player, but like hasn't really, not to say it hasn't impressed, but hasn't like been given the opportunity to show he can do it in MLS yet. So like I think it's coming up on a very important year for him. But I always like what I see from Brendan McSorley. Like he always has effort. I think he understands, especially as a striker, like when to get into the box, like the right spots to be in. And I think, just kind of seeing that polish on him is what they're looking for. But in a situation like that against Aston Villa as well, to see him looking like that.
Right. He looked relatively comfortable at times. And, if we're ahead more often, if we didn't have kids that weren't getting enough minutes, I think he would absolutely be a regular sub, kind of at the end of a game. But it is what it is this year. So I'm glad we got to talk about that. It's been something that's been bugging me. You're listening to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. We are here to get you ready for this Nashville matchup with St. Louis at home on Saturday. And we're going to get a little bit more specific now with some of the strengths of Nashville, some of the strengths of St. Louis, what we might end up seeing from these teams, where they might have an advantage or a weakness. So let's look at that now. St. Louis strengths. Only one, shooting from direct free kicks. And we do have Leuven now. I used to read that and think, well, Leuven's hurt. So do we actually even have that? We do have Leuven.
Thanks to one man.
That's really nice. Nashville strengths, attacking down the wings. We mentioned Andy Nahar there. I imagine that's what we're looking at there. Not to mention their other wingers have so much quality as well. Creating chances using through balls is a new Nashville thing, right? Creating chances through individual skill, creating scoring chances, shooting from free kicks, although they have the least amount of free kicks in the league. I believe I found that. Finishing scoring chances. Finishing sounds pretty awesome to me right now. Attacking set pieces, defending set pieces. We know the quality they have in their defensive players. St. Louis's weaknesses is defending set pieces, defending against attacks down the wings, protecting the lead is a big one that's been killing me. Stopping opponents from creating chances, finishing scoring chances, defending against long shots, defending against skillful players. And we are going to dig into that, especially in a second. But before that, Nashville's weaknesses, defending against skillful players, avoiding offside. Yeah, they have the most offside fouls in the league right now. That's pretty interesting as well. Anything kind of strike you there? Actually, I'll let you have the pick of what we want to dig into here. It's a lot.
I don't like hearing that they create chances using through balls. I feel like that's something that defensively St. Louis has been exposed on a few times this year. Potentially worrying. But yeah, if St. Louis are going to win this game, grab points in this game, they're going to have to really show that they've really made that improvement over the last couple of weeks, because Nashville are a good team. You can see how many strengths they have in just their attack and in how they play and how they're how they're structured. Not an easy team to break down, and they know how they want to play it. So you're going to have to come with your A game.
Yeah, and breaking down someone with a good defensive structure, I mean, that just scares me every time it happens.
Yeah.
At least we're at home. It seems like St. Louis has a little bit more fire going forward at home. But yeah, what were you going to say?
No, it's like the natural progression of like talking to, like in the press conferences with David Critchley, he's talking about how he wants to see the full 90 come together. If you think of how they played against Minnesota and how they've not, throwing out the Dallas result, but how they played against Portland, how they played against some of those more well-structured teams at home, like they have gotten close to putting it all together, but obviously there have been some crucial moments where it's all fallen apart. So avoiding that crucial moment where it all falls apart, but like building on to past successes against a team like Nashville, if you can do that, like that's a good sign for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it does feel like it's almost there. And one of the really encouraging stats that I saw is that Hartle is second in key passes in the entire MLS. So that's really awesome. And that kind of speaks to what you just said, which it just feels like that finish or, him getting a key pass in there and someone not wasting it. It seems really important. And so even getting Torchert in the right places, some of the other things like, Celio can be wasteful in that final thing. He's so amazing up into that point. So, you could think of that as we're almost there, but maybe even one more attacking player who can play in tight spaces could be the difference.
If there's any comfort, it's that Hartle does have like premier MLS like progression stats this year. So like at least you know that you have one in your like DP, the guy that you kind of need to be a hit, like does work in this league, and you can build around that. Yeah, teams have come back from worse.
Oh no, absolutely. There's something here. And again, having these guys back gives me even more hope, especially having Leuven in there to kind of unlock Hartle in some ways. It's not just Hartle pulling all the weight. Those two together in and around the box is really fun to watch. And creating space, even with big switches, is something that's been missing as well. So I'll be my own corrections department here. Nashville is fourth in XG. They are first in offside. I was right about that, but they're second to last in free kicks, not last. So interesting one there. Third in shots on target and shooting percentage. So they are putting them on target really well, doing a good job getting shots on target. Fourth in progressive passing distance. Does that strike you any specific way? I read that and I thought, well, sounds like Zimmerman putting in, balls splitting lines kind of thing, but maybe it's more than that. Maybe Nahar's jumping in there and sending some passes in.
Yeah, I think they just want to if you're absorbing pressure, then just trying to like play into the counter, like they want to throw those through balls in. I think that's part of it too. But yeah, I think Zimmerman's been like, they've been having a lot of trust in their back line to put the ball forward. And that's kind of how I read that as well.
And Jack Mayer's always been good at that, even when he was a teenager. So, he could be a part of that. He's sometimes a starter
at the very least.
Yeah, completely true. And one last stat that I found that is going to back up what we were saying: Hartle being second in key passes, but we're also last in the league in assists. So that just shows you, we're getting good chances. maybe not perfect chances and maybe not perfect finishes, things like that. So
yeah, and I think like you kind of saw that a little bit towards the tail end of the Melberg era, but definitely since Critchley has taken over, that they are generating like good to great shots, and if you look at kind of the XGs of what is a great shot, what is a good or opportunity, and what is a good opportunity, they're generating those. They're just kind of being, not to say wasteful, but aren't capitalizing on those opportunities,
yeah,
aren't putting them in the back of the net.
absolutely. We're running short on time just a little bit because I want to talk about some other things here. But field tilt, I do want to mention this. Nashville had a 44 field tilt. That's 44 yards from the end line, I believe. So that's relatively high, then higher than their average for sure. When they played against San Diego FC, St. Louis doesn't look like San Diego FC. So I imagine we'll see something closer to that average of 40, maybe even lower, depending on how St. Louis plays. But St. Louis also averages 38, not terribly different. They averaged 40 in the last game against Minnesota. So pressing high, I think both teams will kind of look to take their pick their moments. But I'm curious to see how that plays out between the two teams because, you know, similar heights, different mentalities, in my opinion. So
Yeah,
that'll
and
be
I
fun to
think
watch.
if the prevailing wisdom is still like, if the thought is that you force St. Louis to have the ball and try to make them beat you, then I can see St. Louis having a high field tilt again, just because they want to be more comfortable on the ball, and I think teams aren't necessarily bought in that they are yet. So, like I do kind of see that, unless like they just can't, because sometimes you just get overrun, and
Yeah.
I don't necessarily see that happening because I do think they've improved in that, but.
Yeah, and Minnesota was definitely one of those teams. Like, please take the ball.
Yeah.
We trust ourselves to take it from you. Just like that PSG opening play, they tried the PSG thing and they hit it. It was a free kick instead
Yeah,
of, or sorry, it was a goal kick.
did not work out how they wanted it to, but I
Right.
see the idea. Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun to see that happen. Based on even after Matt saying this is what they want to do, they went full PSG with it. That was fun. Okay. Biggest conversation I want to have here, and we're going to get into this with the starting 11, which is next. So we'll just blend these two things together. Fall and Kessler are training together, right? Fall only has 2 weeks worth of training, I think, if I don't have that incorrect. Kessler only has a couple days. You mentioned those through balls being a problem. Obviously, the things Nashville's good at are the things that St. Louis has been bad at. Is the defensive problem merely just getting more quality at those center back positions? If those two play and do well, if they knock the rust off well enough, do we have a pretty good chance against Nashville? Or what do you think what'll happen there?
Yeah, I do wonder because I think Baumgartel still makes the start, but like obviously Fall is pretty close. Like you saw him in the second half, and he's been
Yeah,
playing, so like it's not like he's
true.
coming from off season necessarily with how the season's worked in Norway. It's like he was in season, so he should be like ready to hop in there. I'm not sure if they're like going to give Kessler the start right away because I think he's still working his way back, but
Mm.
I would definitely expect him to hit the field on Saturday. And yeah, I do wonder like how much of it is individual defensive play and how much of it is just having trust that like because they're getting taken on a lot of give and goes this year. How much of that is
Yeah.
like the player themselves following the ball and not having trust that like if they stand back that it's going to be covered, and how much of that is like individual failure in that moment. So like is that on the center back pair and the understanding, or is that on the individual skill of the center back? I guess is what I'm getting at.
I know. Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what I was wondering too. I was kind of curious where you were going to go for that. But clearly, this is something I hit on hard was watching in the first half of the last time Leuven came into a game at the end. It was Ostrak and Vollum just diving in on guys around the box, and all they had to do was force 2 or 3 dive-ins, and then someone's wide open at the top of the box. And then literally Leuven came in the second half of that game, and he was just perched at the top of the box in the middle. He wouldn't chase the ball every time, right? Sometimes he would. It's just veteran presence. He's got the wisdom to know where to be at the right time.
Yeah, maybe
Exactly
it's
what
just
you
that
just said.
composure. Yeah.
Yeah, like have the confidence to kind of sit in a spot and be confident that you can block it or get to whatever ball might be dangerous, and picking and choosing those moments. So that could be true for the center backs as well. Even so, I have a good feeling about Fall. even if it's him and Baumgartel, I'm gonna feel pretty good about what we got back
Yeah,
there.
made some nice passes from what I saw in that
Yeah,
45-minute stint against Aston Villa. So,
it almost looks
yeah,
like
there's definitely a good player there for sure.
yeah. I think, and I would do this too if I was Fall. Like, I'm good at this. I'm gonna find a moment that I can make myself look good against Aston
Yeah.
Villa, and he sure did. He did. Okay. I think we might as well jump into the starting 11. I should ask you, is there anything else you'd like to cover? I know you did write a story on your Substack about Nashville and a whole bunch of things that are going on right now. Is there anything we missed on that?
No, yeah, I think like obviously with Nashville, yeah, the story I wrote like earlier this year was just about like their like Latin American supporter group and just like feeling like they were being, not to say attacked, but like singled out by ICE forces in Nashville. Like there hasn't really
Mm,
been an update on that because that operation has been done. But like what you saw from that moment was like the team kind of rallying behind them, and getting a lot of support from not just Nashville but MLS in general. And I think it's a good
mm,
reminder that we're all kind of in the same boat. Like all fandoms are very similar with how we support each other. So it's
mm,
nice to see that like MLS wide support coming out of that moment. But obviously, like it's a real worry for a lot of people of like, if you go to this game, will you be singled out because you're a part of a Latin American supporters group? Like, because they have just kind of been targeting people based on appearance and not necessarily if they feel like you're actually an illegal immigrant or not. So I think it's definitely a worry that like, and I know talking to Santos, like people have had there as well. So something to, I don't know, think about when you go to the game, I guess.
absolutely. Well, and we've had unfortunate drama coming from the other side, and it's what a tough spot to be in when you're a club. But I love to see that from Nashville. I'm so glad you brought that up, Justin. I appreciate it. And even just to bring it more personal, I saw someone post the Locos Tacos guy with a hat with a very strong statement, and I immediately worried for him. You know what I mean? Like probably goes to these games to some extent, and if someone showed up to his restaurant or to this game, like,
Mm.
God, I'd hate to see that for him. But I respect him making a statement there. So, yeah, dude, thanks for bringing that up. It's something to keep in our minds all the time right now, of course. But let's switch to the starting 11. I'll give mine, and then I'm curious what you think, and we'll get out of here. I will say Berkey, Padelford at left back. I'll say Fall and Kessler, but again, I won't mind if it's Fall and Baumgartel. I would love to see Kessler come in at the end, though. Of course, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about Durkin getting that red card at the end of the last game because he wasn't quite ready. Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe out of position too. You could argue anything there, but I'll say Vollum at right back for now. Ostrak and Leuven at the dual pivot. I've enjoyed seeing Celio Hartle and Songbin across the attacking wings and 10. Klaus up top, of course. Few storylines there though, but I'm curious what you think, Justin.
I kind of see the same starting 11.
Okay.
Like I get the feeling that like at least to start the game, like that's how, just because they feel like they've had some progress with that group recently. Especially if you think back to the Minnesota start, before it all kind of fell apart. But yeah, that I think Wallum played well there. Like obviously Leuven getting the start, Hartle, Klaus, and then I think Sangbin, they like they want to keep trying that. See, I don't think that competition has actually changed anything yet. I could see them going in this direction again, and then just kind of seeing what happens in this match. But
Mm.
yeah, and it really interests to see what happens on the wings with Celio and Sungbin and how they can kind of utilize. They have different skill sets, but like ideally, you should be able to utilize both sides like more evenly than we have throughout the season so far, if you have that speed on the right as well.
I completely agree. I guess some of the things that Matt's last lineup thought that maybe Totland starts at right back and we push Vollum up to one of the wings. It'd be interesting to see Songbin and Vollum playing at the same time. I would actually love to see that. I think Totland has I think he's amazing. So I would love to see that. Also Orozco was in his starting lineup last time at left back over Padelford. So I don't know. What do you think about that? It seems like to me there's a storyline here because Orozco has been amazing except for one moment in a game, right? So that's been hard for me to. That's why I think maybe he needs to send that message, have the guy that makes less mistakes, but maybe isn't as flashy play to kind of show him, hey, you got to figure this out. What do you think about that though?
Yeah, it's interesting too for both because they like both Orozco and Padelford like don't have a lot of MLS experience. So I think like those mistakes you have to kind of expect them from young players making the jump, and I don't think you can necessarily always be punishing young players for the mistakes as well. And I think
Sure.
Richley has that mindset. So it'll be interesting. Yeah, I think Padelford just because they like that he's left-footed and they don't have anyone else that can be left-footed.
He's
Makes
very
sense.
mid, right? He's decent going forward, decent defending, so it's fine. Either one, they'll both be in the mix, right? No matter what. So I think both players should be pretty happy with that position, considering where they came from, playing on two teams most of the season. So last one, I forgot to do this, but really quick, Jeremy Clement says, do we want TAM guys primarily being used as subs? It sounds like he's saying, are we sure we want a TAM guy as a sub, or is that money kind of wasted? What do you think?
I mean, like it all depends on like how you're playing. I don't necessarily like ideally your guys that you're paying at that level,
Mm.
I think would be in the starting 11, but I get what he's saying. He's not saying that you necessarily have to prioritize those guys, but like ideally you want your players that are just below that DP level to be making that impact on the field. But sometimes the player is at their best as a super sub as well. So I don't think you can necessarily discount like a player not being in the starting 11 as not being an impactful player. Like I think we have to remember that that 12th, 13th, 15th, 16th player is also just as important over the course of a 90-minute game.
Absolutely. Yep. And the way that Lutz builds his teams, it feels like he's just going for deals and he throws them whatever slot is available and where it makes the most sense. So I don't want to overthink the word TAM on this one. So let's do our prediction and get out of here. I'm going to say 1-1 because of Nashville's. Basically, I'll just say that if St. Louis wins this game, I think it'll be because of defense, not offense, because offense is there. We just got to figure out how to attack while still defending against such good players. What do you think, Justin?
I think 1-1 is a good shout. Yes, because I don't know if they necessarily have the firepower to break down Nashville twice, but I can definitely see them, especially if they're playing in that first 45, how they played against Minnesota. And that's the thing about that Minnesota game too. If they would have, they had opportunities to go up 2-0. So if they can take advantage of that. But yeah, I think 1-1 is a good shout.
Awesome. Justin, thank you so much for, again, bailing me out. But again, your insights, man, they're so good. I really appreciate you coming on,
Thanks
giving
for
us a
having me.
different view on that one. Yeah, man. So thank you for listening, everyone out there. We're Flyover Footy on the big 550 KTRS. Enjoy the game on Saturday, guys. Talk to you later.